January 8th. Welcome to the Hastings-on-Hudson Board of Education meeting. I'm very excited. We have a full house. There are lots of really wonderful celebrations, so that's great. Before we do begin, though, I just want to begin by talking briefly about Brian Foster. I know all of you knew Brian Foster, and our community lost him last week. Brian worked here for 9 years, and I know those of you who knew him couldn't help but be touched by him. And, was Brian, was he the wildly successful guy on Wall Street? No. Was he the doctor who cured cancer? No. But he was the guy, whenever you met him, he gave everything he had just to you. He had a heart as big as this room. He had a smile, even though he was in levels of pain that we can't ever imagine. And he loved, I would say the kids, but he loved us all. And I know we all felt it. And I always go back to how these high school kids, many of you, 2 years ago, had us at a big spaghetti dinner to help him out because he was having a hard time. I don't remember that ever happening, ever. So Brian was a light in our eyes, and I think he's what we treasure here at Hastings. He's that person who models for us being kind and being grateful despite everything he faced, and being warm and being embracing and being non-judgmental. So we would just like to take a moment of silence to think about Mr. Foster. I believe it was today that his family held a memorial service, which they very much wanted to be very small and private. But we know that many of us are grieving him and need to talk about him. So the school, and I believe it's Patrick who's putting most of this together, Patrick Theodore, thank you. We are going to have a remembrance ceremony, and I'm just going to read the email that went out.
It will go out.
Oh, sorry, that will go out. The remembrance ceremony will begin at 6:30 this coming Thursday, January 11th. It's going to be in the Cochran Gym because we're actually concerned that the auditorium may not be big enough. It's going to be open to our full community, and there'll be an open mic for anybody who wants to come forward and just share your thoughts and feelings about Mr. Foster. Our music department from the high school is going to add some music as well. With that, I'll turn it over to...
Thank you. So thank you for sharing that, Lisa, and thank you to all of you for being here tonight, and to Patrick for helping to organize this event, and other people have been actively involved as well. Ariana, who works in our library, and Maureen have been actively part of it, as has Jesse, trying to free up the gym on Thursday afternoon. So it's been a concerted effort among several people so that we can celebrate Brian's life and the impact that he's had on our community. So a blast will be going out to the community shortly with those details, just so you all are aware of that. So some other events coming up. We thank you all for also navigating the snow days on Thursday and Friday. We were really very conscious of making sure our kids were safe and making sure that everyone was warm. And Elliot, how did that play out? Did you all make use of those extra days? A lot of studying?
Yeah. All day.
But so thank you to the support of our community as well. I just wanted to share that. So we have a few events coming up. We have, in case those 2 snow days weren't enough, we have off on Monday as well. We are closed, though, honoring Martin Luther King Jr., which is an important day for us. Also, we have the Grade 6 musical, and that's coming up next Friday and Saturday, January 19th and 20th. They're doing Godspell, I believe, and we'll get to that in a moment. We have a policy committee meeting coming up. We have the Farragut Middle School PTSA meeting, and then our next board meeting is January 22nd. Also, although it's a little further out, just to put on people's radar, on March 5th, which is one of our next upcoming board meetings, we're going to be doing a public hearing on the acceptable technology use policy to get input from our community. So just mark your calendars. We'll be including that announcement in the upcoming board meetings as well. So also excited to share a few highlights. It's been a little bit of a short break between our last meeting and this meeting, right before the holidays and then after the holidays and the snow days. So first and foremost, there was a really wonderful event organized over the course of the winter break, and we honored and dedicated the basketball court in the Cochran Gym to Coach Costello. And from what I understand, over 25 or 30 of his family members were in attendance, which is pretty special. Unfortunately, Coach Costello passed away a few weeks ago, but his family was really well represented there. And again, congratulations to Jesse Merchant and his team for organizing not only the basketball tournament, which our kids did really well at, but also the event honoring Coach Costello, who was, so the floor, this is something I had to learn, so I didn't really know what that meant that we dedicated it, but the floor has his name on it. It's a pretty big deal. And he was a PE teacher here. He was a varsity basketball coach, athletic director at the time. He was in the Westchester Sports Hall of Fame, which is pretty significant, in the Hastings Hall of Fame as well, and in the New York State Hall of Fame. So really honor to have Coach Costello's name associated with not only our community, but particularly the athletic portion of our community. So, and during his time here, 7 league championships, 4 sectional crowns, and 1 Eastern Regional Championship. So, I don't know, crowns are good. So that's clearly a very big deal that we had that happen. So thank you, Jesse, for organizing the event, and thank you to our basketball team, both our ladies and our men, and the work that they did over the course of the week. So thank you very much for that. We also had a really cool activity that unfolded in our kindergarten classrooms. They used Wixie as a digital platform. The kindergartners used this platform to do some storytelling. So they wrote stories with like a beginning, middle, and end. It's something that they were working on in Writer's Workshop. And then they just used the digital platform to basically capture the images from their stories, and then their voices could be heard over the stories. So it was really cute. Our families, I don't know, Doug, yes, you were there.
He hasn't showed it to me yet.
He hasn't. So very close to the vest with it, but it was really great because, yes, in essence, it was reinforcing this notion of storytelling for our kids, right? And so we know that good authors are good storytellers, and so that was something they worked on. It was really quite cute to see in action. And then just upcoming things, as you heard. We do have the concert coming up. We do have also a first grade is doing a peace march. That is on Thursday, January 11th. And just so you know, Lee Gillanis she's a retired first grade teacher. She's coming to lead the march, and the program serves an authentic learning experience and an on-site field trip for the students in grade 1 at Hillside as they explore the concepts directly connected to historical events and influential people. The students will learn about the life and accomplishments of Martin Luther King. So it also connects to their second step work there at Hillside. And each first grade classroom will read and discuss Martin Luther King Jr. They will then read Ruby Bridges and other grade level appropriate books. And the students will have a cross-curricular link as they learn the songs, This Little Light of Mine and We Shall Overcome. And finally, they'll be able to listen to relevant portions of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. And they will do this peace march at Hillside on Thursday morning. So if you guys are free, come on down and check that out. And then the grade 6 musical, which is Godspell, January 19th and 20th. That is next Friday and Saturday. Definitely going to be, if it's anything like any of the other musicals and shows that I've seen so far, it's going to be an event. So come on out. So, thank you.
You know, Tony, I'm also going to add about the Kenneth and Mamie Clark work.
Oh, yes.
Because we may have some
please jump in
people.
There. Thank you.
So it's really exciting this year. Some of you may have heard of Dr. Kenneth Clark and his wife, Mamie Clark. They lived in Hastings, and they were part of an early African-American suburban community here. Dr. Clark and his wife, Mamie, were both leaders in the field of psychology. Dr. Clark was actually the first African-American regent on our New York Board of Regents. And Dr. Clark testified in Brown versus Board of Education. His house is in town. So the school, the fabulous team put together by the PTSA, is working with our Historical Society to create an exhibit here at the high school and one at Hillside to help educate our kids about Dr. Clark's life and his work. And I think we are even going to be lucky enough to be bringing a woman named Mary Jean Trickey.
Minnie
Jean Trickey. She was one of the first African-American students that went to an all-white school following Brown versus Board of Education. And she lived with Clarks for a while. She's going to come to Hastings. We're trying to get this off board and come speak to us, which would be fabulous. So I'm sharing this early now because there's a team of people from the PTSA, and I think SEPTA as well, right? I think SEPTA's working with PTSA on this. SEPTA and the PTSA are working with the Historical Society about how to create this exhibit. So if there's anybody out there and, 6 to 96 anyone who's interested, just reach out to either the SEPTA presidents or the PTSA presidents, and we will happily give you a role. Okay.
Thank you. So.
And now with that, we're going to turn to Jesse Merchant. And I want to say thank you. This is Jesse's first year as our athletic director, and I love that he's adding celebrations of our fabulous athletes, because I always believe when we have something good to say, let's say it. So thank you, Jesse, for putting this together.
Thank you guys, obviously, for the opportunity. I wish that I had more time, and because every single day should be filled with events like this, right, for all of the things that you student athletes that are here and parents who are here to support them, for you to enjoy, right? There's a lot of time, there's a lot of effort, and it's really wonderful to be able to witness some of the things that we witness on kind of a daily basis happening within our sports teams, on our fields, in our gymnasiums, all that. I'm thrilled that so many of you came out tonight. Like I said, we were trying to put together a few things this year really to kind of accent that recognition of all the effort that you put forth, the time that you have to set aside to be part of our sports community. I think that's an important thing because I learned a lot through my participation in sports and activity. But it's not always so much what you get from that sport or activity, but also what we give others, right? Before I move on to some of the fall awards, which I know is exactly why most of you guys are here, I do feel like I want to say just a quick note about both Brian Foster and about Coach Costello. Over the break, just a few days ago, we had our court dedication for Coach Costello, and like you mentioned, I didn't know people had families that large. There was almost 30 people there from the Costello clan. It was pretty staggering. But it was a really wonderful thing. It brought together community members, not just present community members, but people from all over the United States, people who had played basketball or been taught by Coach Costello. I didn't realize until long after the dedication that my sister had him as a physical education teacher her freshman year. I mean, I think as educators, we touch more people than we really ever recognize in some cases. But I say that because I think it's important to understand that all of the athletes in the room, you are part of a larger community, right? A community that you see is just your fellow students, right? The other 9th graders, the other 10th graders, 11th graders, 12th graders. But what I'm trying to explain is that it's really a much larger group. People who have both participated in athletics here in Hastings, but then outside, all right? I did want to show we created basically a section of the flooring. We took the original flooring that was removed back in August, Martin Castles and a little bit of my help. We put together 2 kind of plaques to represent that floor and that dedication. One went to the family, and this one we're going to put downstairs in the award case down there to stay. Talks about the dedication from the other day, and it's just kind of honoring that commitment to what he contributed. The second piece really is about Brian Foster. And we talk about that community that people are a part of when they're a part of not just Hastings Athletics, but also Hastings Schools. And that is really a place where people can find friendships, they can learn, and they can enjoy all that we have really here to offer. Brian, most people think of Brian for his time in our elementary school working with students. Others think of him here in the high school up in the library. Everyone thinks of him really with that smile, and there's always questions about you, never really questions about Brian. One of my fondest memories, Brian was one of the assistant coaches the last time we won a sectional championship for volleyball. And that was an experience that I was welcomed into by the athletes and the coaching staff. And that was a really exciting experience for me. I was a completely mediocre athlete in high school. I had never experienced that level of competition, that level of accomplishment. And when I was their athletic director, this was years ago, of course, they brought me right into their little family. And it was a wonderful feeling. And that's how I will remember Brian. So from kind of the sad, right, to the celebration, right? What I'd like to do is I want to really bring everyone together in events like this. Most of you, in fact, I think almost every single one of you students were at our banquet back about 6 weeks ago. I had a great time. I don't know about you guys, but I had a great time. I think one of the best things about that event was the fact that it was really centered completely on you guys. Very little adults had anything to say, right? All of the speeches were given by students. Even our keynote speaker was our mascot, and I hope he doesn't yell at me for giving away his identity, right? But Sam Johnson got up and spoke very, very well. He wasn't one of our varsity athletes back in the fall, but he contributed to our little family, right? And that experience really highlighted that commitment you make and what you offer others within athletics. Well, tonight is to try to take another element of that, right? And not just talk about your commitment and everything, but also your accomplishments. That night we did our best to completely avoid talking about records and awards and all this stuff. We really just talked about our community. So now is the night where I get to actually talk about all the awesome things that we accomplished and all that. So just a couple of notes. It wouldn't be a good award ceremony if I didn't really embarrass a couple of the students. So when we get to your sport, I'm going to ask you to kind of stand up and come up front. All right? I'm going to ask a favor of you guys. When I'm done, and I promise to keep it way shorter than all this, all right, I want a big thank you from you guys to them for all the things that they've done and created and brought to our community. When you are done being embarrassed, come on, your parents are here, most of your parents are here. They want to see this, okay? We have all league plaques. We have all league honorable mention, certificates. We have all that over here, and we'll try to hand those out as we go back to our seats, okay? I would ask, and I don't think anyone would ever do otherwise, just hang around till the very end. It'll only be a couple minutes, all right? So one of the things that happened at our banquet 6 weeks ago was that the boosters handed out varsity letters. You guys all remember what varsity letters are. Half of you guys remember what varsity letters are. But the students said, what are these? That varsity letter, we talked about this, right, is a symbol of all of those things that we do, the commitment we make, sacrifices, the accomplishments, all of that. Not too many people are walking around in their leather jackets anymore, their varsity jackets, but typically that's where they would end up. So if you're anything like me, 20 years from now, when you move into your own home, your parents are going to give you your baby box, and in the bottom of it is going to be your varsity H with your pins. So,
and then
first,
what will you do with it?
That's right. That's my house. We're actually going to frame it.
If you like.
Don't worry, you have time, guys. I'm going to ask our varsity girls cross country. I know we have a couple of you here. Come on up. Yeah, face this way. Yeah, face this way. Here, slide over just
Face the camera.
a little bit.
Jesse, maybe face the camera. What do you think?
Yeah, face the camera.
Oh, okay, all right. Turn around for the camera. Even better, there's more people we can embarrass you in front of. This is perfect. So I do feel it's important to recognize both the group accomplishment and also the individual accomplishment. We had 2 league championship teams this year. One of them was our girls cross-country team. So let's give them a quick round of applause. Quickly, individual honors here. We have Caitlin Guilfoyle, Caroline Fogarty, Alexandra Rotmill-Esser, Cheyenne Ettinger, and Hallie Sprock for all league honors. And for all league honorable mention, we have Elena Schmidt and Catherine Sarkis. All right? And just to point out one thing even further, we had 2 athletes during the fall compete at the state level, which is really, really exciting. Most of us, when we think of state competition, we think of our soccer team from last year, right? But we have some athletes in more individualized sports that compete at the state level pretty often, and this is really exciting, right? So on our girls cross-country team, we had Caitlin Guilfoyle compete way up in Rochester. So thank you very much, guys. Thanks, come on over here. Let's do Cheyenne. Thank you. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Caroline. Caitlin.
Can you wait up there with your class?
Oh, this is great. I'm loving every minute of this. Allie.
Everyone just look this way, so people on this side can take a picture. The other way.
Thank you, guys. You guys can take a seat.
And there's Caitlin.
Yep, that was Caitlin. You can.
A little delayed, sorry.
No, it's all right. Don't worry about it. Field hockey. I know we have. Was there a perform? Oh, this is the best. Come on out. Our field hockey team, they had, I learned a couple of very important things about field hockey this year, right? One of them is there is a huge difference between playing field hockey on a turf field and a grass field. Is that correct? Huge, huge difference. In fact, they've even created two leagues. They call it the grass field league and the turf field league. You can imagine playing field hockey, especially if you dig it up a little bit, right? It's very, very difficult on grass because while the ball moves a little slower, you never really know where it's going. So this year, I want to really thank all of our athletes for their effort, all right, and their accomplishment. This year, Rebecca Litsky got all league honors for her efforts this season. So thank you. She's not here tonight, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it. Okay? Hannah Sperber, we actually have two athletes this year that won Enterprise Player of the Year. Hannah Sperber was our goalie for field hockey, all right? And when Ken Kostick at Rivertown Sports with Enterprise called me up and asked about Hannah Sperber, he was really excited because it's wonderful to have just one Player of the Year for a school, but to have the opportunity to have, one in field hockey and then one in another sport we'll go over in a second was really an honor. All right. Would you mind? All right. Hastings football. We have a few of us here. Come on up, Justin, Frank. So, really quickly, just to understand, I know I'm saying all league honorable mention. It really does help to understand a little bit of how that's decided. All league, the ones that we've given out already and the ones that we will give out, are honors that are given to only a few athletes within their whole league, right? That represents, in some cases, hundreds of athletes. So we have two of them here with us today for football. But as we go through today's celebration, what we're really highlighting is just like really the top 10% or so of athletes within the leagues that we compete in. It's a wonderful, wonderful honor. So here with us today, we have Justin Caraballo and Frank Carosa, but we also have Brian Dosen as an all-league recipient. So, Frank.
Can you get a picture, please? Can you go back? Okay, you turn that way this
Eli Jones, who couldn't be here with us tonight, was an honorable mention for an all-league award. So now on to the second group, the second team that was a league champion, which is my boys soccer team. So Alex, come on up, buddy. I see you. You're the only one. You stand right next to me. Right next to me. So Alex is here because I bumped him 3 or 4 times a week for the last 4 weeks, okay, to make sure that he attends. You're going to hear his name a lot in the next few minutes, only because if you weren't familiar with his accomplishments last year, you'll be even more impressed by the things that he's accomplished this year. On Alex's team, they, again, were one of the league championship teams. All league honors went to Alex Bourgeois, Reed Koken, Julian Jacobs, and Willem Boss. All right? But beyond that, okay, Alex received all section honors, which is when we talked about those all league honors. Now he's being compared to athletes from every school in all of Section 1. It's a much more challenging award to receive, much more prestigious, and it's an honor. Now, it wasn't just Alex. Reed Koken also received that same honor this year, and to have one all-section athlete on the team is great. To have 2 is wonderful, and so to pile on, really the icing on some of Alex's accomplishments this year. He, too, was an Enterprise Player of the Year. He was also the league MVP. That was the one athlete from his whole soccer league that was chosen by all of the coaches of that league. All right? He also was recognized for small schools as an all-state athlete. So, Alex, really good. Thanks, buddy. All right. Now we have girls soccer, correct? Yes, girls soccer. Now, do me a favor. Do me a favor. Count up the number of athletes that received all league honors. Add to that the athletes that were honorable mention. That's 11. How many players play on a soccer team? 11 start. That's a pretty big accomplishment, right? We just went from one athlete who we're looking at a whole team here. This is amazing. Now, I've only been in this business for about 5 years, education for longer, but as an athletic director for about 5 years. I've never witnessed this. I've never seen a team that had so many students recognized for their individual accomplishment. The heartbreaker here was, right, they had a record of 11-4. Didn't win the league championship. But that's because they had one of the toughest leagues that we saw in the fall. They had an Irvington team that was sending a couple of girls to Division I schools. They had, it was a really, really tough league to compete in. So I'm going to ask all my girls soccer players, come on up. All league honors went to Ani Lefevre, Emily Penner, Allie Manley, Eve Aronoff, Samantha Gabay, Julia Spencer, who, by the way, you did an awesome job in goal that one game. I can't even remember who it was. Tia Abiridzik, Phoebe Sander, and Skylar Yusepovich. Okay, that's all league honors. All league honorable mention goes to Anna Fernandez and Ava Nelson. So we have a few more things here. We also have a few athletes on this team that also received all section honors. Skylar received that all section honor, kind of like we talked about with Alex and Reed, while all section honorable mention went to Ani Lefevre and Julia Spencer. All right? Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you, guys. You guys are great for that. Thank you. For their team, and he couldn't be here tonight, every few years, one of our coaches are recognized. I know it's not a student, I'm so sorry. And this is the best photo I could find of him. He's all the way on the right, sitting in the shadow. But our coach, Kirk Bamford, was honored by all of his coaches, fellow coaches throughout Section 1, as a Coach of the Year. So while he couldn't be here tonight for us, he didn't even tell me this. I found it out from somebody else, okay? Because I think he was a little embarrassed. He didn't want to talk about the accomplishment. So if you see him, when you see him, congratulate him for this honor. To go on the record, Allie hates this photo. But I have to explain, right? It's impossible to get a good photo of someone swimming. She knows that I must have pulled 4 photos. We started down in the athletic hallway there. We started large format photos of our athletes. We're adding them with each season. Well, I blew up like 4 or 5 athletes thinking they were Allie. Every single time she'd be like, nope, that's somebody from Irvington. No, that's somebody from... Okay? So I just said, I know this is Allie. We're putting that one in there. All right. Allie, there's a few things. I had the pleasure this year. Come on up. You don't get out. You don't get out.
Drag me back.
I realized a few things during this past swim season. The first thing is the days that Allie doesn't come visit me in the athletic office, I get nervous. All right, I worry if she's out sick or something's happened. The other thing is, there are a few sports that I absolutely love being a spectator at. I really do. It's like, I don't think I realized it until this year. There are certain sports that are just awesome to participate in as a fan. And it's not really the ones that I always thought were going to be so much fun. I went to the state swim meet up at Ithaca College, and even though I'm a Cortland State grad, I still went there, and they're our biggest rival, but it's not a big deal. I realized that going to certain events, a wrestling match, a swim meet, a track and field event, those are times when every single person in the stadium, stands, pool, arena, whatever you want to call it, everyone's cheering. And everything's positive. And I love that. It's different than maybe 10th grade Jesse, who was in the top, of the basketball bleachers yelling things at opponents. Very different. So I love that experience. Being able to be there with Allie and some of her family was a really wonderful time to really witness the highest level that you can experience. Caitlin, I have to apologize. Rochester's a long way away. Ithaca's so much closer. So, actually, I mentioned both of your names because what we're going to try to do this year, Allie already knows, while I was up at her event in Ithaca, I purchased this New York State, I'm not even going to go through the whole name for it.
But I can do it.
We purchased this.
It's New York State Public High School
Oh, you're getting
Athletic Association.
You guys know the reason why she knows that, right? Because she's competed at the state level how many years in a row? I know the answer.
5.
I know it's at least 5. She's competed at the state level in swimming at least 5 years. My memory can't go 6 years. I have no idea. Probably 6. I don't know. Okay. So what we did, we're hoping to actually hang this in the athletic office because very often we find sometimes it's wonderful to have team honors, right? But it's also nice to represent the accomplishments of individuals. All right. So this will be hanging in the athletic office starting tomorrow morning as soon as we can get it hung up. Thanks. Allie's team. I've been torturing you for so long. I'm so sorry. Allie's team placed 10th in the state in the 400-meter freestyle relay. correct? Did I get that right?
400 yards.
400 yards. Meters, yards, I'm so close. So while she did not receive an all-league or all-section award, that accomplishment puts her really in the top like 1% of swimmers in New York State, and that is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So thank you, Alan. We have a few more. We don't have any of our girls tennis players here, but for all league honors, we have Savoy Koken and Clara Hatch. They both played they competed in the sectional brackets as well. And next we have our volleyball team, Zoe Grossman and Jennifer Caruso. Actually, Jennifer Caruso's probably in the middle of a basketball. It's never good to lose, but it's always way worse to drive to Haldane and lose. Okay, way worse. I'm just telling you. That's Cold Spring. It's about an hour and a half by bus.
North.
These two teams at the very end of our presentation, I will make one final plug because I feel like this is one of those items that not enough people know about. Between the volleyball team and the tennis team, they raised over $1,000 for breast cancer research during the fall season. And that was a really excellent, that was supported by the Booster Club in certain ways, but really initiated by all the athletes and coaches. And that was a really awesome thing to accomplish because we hope through athletics, right, to really introduce people to a broader world, all the things that matter outside of athletics and outside of even just education, our little world here. And I thought that was a really nice way to highlight that, all of that work that we try to do every single day. With that said, I'm really going to turn everything over. I think we talked about this before. But if you guys speak to any of your friends, I'll have all these. They can come pick them up for me. I really do appreciate all the parents and all the athletes that came tonight. I'm always trying to think of new ways to kind of honor and congratulate and kind of bring out all of the things that you guys do, all those accomplishments that should be talked about on an everyday basis. So thank you again, guys. Thank you.
I just want to say, I know it's no small feat, even just to be on teams and to go to practice every day and not start your homework till 8 o'clock at night and stay up till midnight. So even without the awards, know that we're proud of you. And I just want to add that we're celebrating you, and thank you, Jesse, and thank you, Maureen, for the work in putting this together, because this is no small feat. I just want to add one more thing, that it does take a village, and as I look around the room, I see a lot of your coaches, I see a lot of your parents, I see our Booster Club parents, and I just would like to give a big round of applause for all these adults that make the difference. We're going to move on, and I know we have really interesting meetings, but if there are some of you who don't want to stay after this point, why don't we take a moment now and just want to leave our exciting
He does a nice job. He does a nice job. I might clip him 15 minutes, but you know what?
You and I would, but I still like it.
Relatively speaking, versus other.
He broke.
Oh, it's nice too. I remember being in high school and getting, awards, and like the sports awards. Like it's nice, like you put in so much time.
I know, believe me, I've lived with it for 8 years.
Oh my God.
Good time though.
Very good.
Or much younger, so I have a 7th grader and a 4th grader, especially my 4th grader, he talks about it. I mean, really, sometimes it's like,
How great is that?
They're town heroes.
Great.
You know, they'll be like, oh, look at that one, Mom. You know, he plays point guard, and you know, he was on the football team. So cute. He knows more than numbers, and it's.
Yeah. I
Played rec basketball.
rec basketball.
There you go.
There you go.
Exactly.
People played rec basketball.
Yep.
People sitting out there play rec
Guys,
basketball.
we're back. So moving along, next on our agenda is the event diversity recruitment workshop.
Yes. Thank you, Lisa. So we had an opportunity prior to the winter break in December. The 3 building principals and myself joined a sort of collaborative group of districts who brought in NEMNET, actually is the name of the group, and they are a minority recruitment and consulting group. And so we partnered with Dobbs Ferry and with Ardsley, and Irvington was there, and then there were some other independent schools and other local districts. So we had an opportunity to hear from one of their specialists, one of their consultants, kind of talk us through some of the strategies that they use and that they offer as it relates to hiring. You know, so we had took us through a couple of activities, which was really interesting. One of the first questions they asked us is, what factor most influence a person of color's candidate, a candidate who is a person of color, their decision to accept their employment offer? And highly rated at the top, and so they kind of give you a list and you pick which one you think is most important. And one of the things that stands out as imperative is the interview process and what that's like for the participant, and also the school's commitment to diversity. And that may not necessarily be communicated through the interview process, but it may be communicated through open house events, sort of recruitment with much intentionality. So that was a really interesting discussion, because a lot of people in the room put salary and benefits as number one. You were asked to rate a bunch of things, and salary and benefits was near the bottom of the list, in fact. So just some stuff through that in terms of exercises that they got us to think about. But they really challenged us to think about some needs, some human resource focal points, financial resources. You know, they talk a lot about recruitment being a line item in the budget, really, doing it with very specific financial implications. Also thinking about what agencies you partner with to recruit candidates, to be very intentional about that, and kind of draw a radius around your organization of 2 to 4 hours. That's where you would potentially vet candidates, right? So whether through local colleges or universities, schools of education, but also broader organizations like the NAACP and Minority Chamber of Commerce, Boys and Girls Clubs, to really kind of cast a wider net than what may be typically done. They offered us some sample calendars for what you might do around recruitment. Now, I will say that the majority of their work is with independent schools, which have different processes around staffing, and are have more flexibility about being intentional with open houses and things of that nature. Whereas needs that arise in a public school setting often are later in the year, right? And you're staffing, let's say, in the spring for July 1 or September 1, whereas in independent schools, they're a year ahead thinking about something that they might need, just based on the financial constraints they don't have because they're funded by private payment. So, but that's still, everyone in our room was for the most part public school districts, so we still had a lot of meaningful discussion around it. They talked to us a little bit about, even in job descriptions, what can be included, so that, again, you're casting a wider net. So one example that they shared with us is, our district or our school is eager to consider applications from traditionally underrepresented groups. So putting that language in even a job description, again, being mindful of what the job description is. And then the last thing they talked to us about was interviewer biases that exist, even just from paper, just looking at where people go to college, or the way that their resume is formatted. And so because of that, the importance of having more than one set of eyes on those resumes. And they actually took us through a couple of exercises again, where they gave us 3 sample resumes. And they said, all right, so if you looked at all 3 resumes, who would you hire and why? And invariably, the first point of conversation was, oh, well, this person went to MIT. I don't remember what the school, but it was Harvard or whatever. And this person went to local college, let's say, and how they were sort of categorized differently. But then once we started digging into the resume a little more closely and looking at their trajectory in terms of how many jobs they've had or where they've actually worked, it suddenly changed the conversation. But if you're, and the point of the exercise was, if you're just one set of eyes looking at it, and your only thing looking at as a starting point is college, you might miss things that are important. So it was a really interesting workshop. We got a lot out of it, and has led to some good discussion amongst the leadership team in thinking about any openings that may be coming up and how we can incorporate the suggestions from NEMNet. So
are they a business, a company that just does recruitment workshop kind of? Or do they help with, can you hire them to help with recruitment?
Yes, they consult. They're great. NEMNet is, when you dig in a little bit, you'll find that they're, I want to say that they've been in existence in 1994, so they've been around for a bit, but they come very highly regarded, and they also talked about doing higher ed work, so it's not just K-12, but K-12 is where their real niche is.
And I will say, I
That's why I was asking.
a list of independent schools that use them, and it's basically every every high-end school you've ever heard of. And then I think some impressive public school districts as well. I think the Cambridge Public School System.
Yes,
uses
in
them.
Massachusetts,
So they have a very impressive resume.
Yeah. And again, it was really just little subtle things, in some instances, that are important to really be reflective of, again, those biases as you're looking at a resume, even as you're speaking, asking questions. What questions you're asking, to make sure you're asking the same questions of all candidates, but that you're asking questions in a broad enough way that everyone has an entry point to answer, that you're not looking for a set answer kind of thing. It was great. It was a great discussion. So that was that.
I have a question, if I may.
Please.
Did they also break it down in terms of gender as well?
Yes.
So, like, within this sort of category and breaking down gender, and if there's additional inherent biases to tweak out?
Yeah, they did, actually, because the exercise where we took it through looking at resumes, that exercise, the research that they shared, and I don't have that exactly in front of me because the presenter shared on the board, was that typically white men are the people looking through resumes. And so that in itself presents potential biases, not just related to race, but also to gender. Now, that being said, education on some level is somewhat unique because there is
More female.
there are a lot of women and men in education, so it's not predominantly one, but at different levels you may see more of a predominant, more men are doing this or more women are doing that, right? So yeah, there was a component of it that was gender related, but it was more from that aspect because the focal point was really about recruiting people of color, like looking at that specifically. But he framed it as biases exist on many levels, and you have to know your organization. If you have 100 people and 79 of them are men, then that's something you need to be mindful of, right? So that's also an example. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Tony, and thank our staff members for
Yes,
attending
they
the
were great.
workshop. It sounds like it was great.
It was wonderful.
Okay, next is our student report.
Well, there hasn't really been much school since the last school.
What'd you do on the snow day? Remember that?
Yeah.
Well played.
But there's something big. I just wanted to add, I think you touched on the John Costello basketball tournament, and I know the boys team won. I don't know exactly what the girls...
The girls' team won their first game, and they lost their second game.
Right. So,
Boys won the tournament?
Boys
Yeah.
won the tournament, yes.
so just want to add that.
Thank you.
Impressive.
Yeah.
For adding that.
Nothing much else going on.
You'll have more next time. We'll have
Yes.
a couple weeks. Hey,
Yeah.
simmer down. No one ever told me I had to be a weatherman for this job.
And I just wanted to ask a quick question. I don't know if it's okay. I heard about that there's going to be an assistant superintendent of curriculum.
Did you?
And I just want to know if that was what that...
Are you looking?
It's interesting.
Right.
No, I'm just one.
If you wait a moment, I'm going to be giving an update.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
How about that? Yeah, it is on the agenda. Good question.
Okay. Next is public comment. We have public. Do we have public comment?
Yeah.
Oh, and I would just ask you to state your name and just if you're a resident of Hastings. You don't have to give your address.
Oh, okay. All right. My name is Kathy Bacher-Schultz, and I'm a resident of Hastings. I actually have 2 children in the middle school. And I just wanted the school board to look into something for me or explain something to me. I looked at back in the last 5 or 6
Sorry to interrupt you.
minutes.
Do you mind just speaking into the mic a little more?
Oh, sure. Okay. I looked into the last 5 or 6 minutes, board minutes from the meetings, and I didn't see any discussion about the chemistry regions or the geometry regions. I understand now that the high school is no longer requiring either chemistry or geometry regions. And I don't understand what analysis was undertaken to make that decision and why it was decided. And I also want to know, the third question was, so how can we determine, if we take these regions out of the scope, how can we look at how Hastings is doing in the STEM courses and compare it against other districts?
I think
Well, I can tell you that the discussion around these Regents courses is one that is ongoing, and it is one that the department chair leadership team at the high school is talking about as it relates to student stress and as it relates to the confinements in instruction being connected to a test. And so it is a discussion that's being considered in the best interest of kids based on certain perspectives, not to discount what you're sharing as a important component to that learning experience, right? How do our kids do, and how are they learning? Especially, I mean, you brought up STEM, and you know, clearly these two courses are rigorous courses within that STEM experience. I can tell you that in the conversations that I've been a part of, there is no discussion about decreasing the rigor of the learning or changing the learning very much, except to unlink it from the assessments that are for the purposes of New York State and not beyond, as it relates to our kids' opportunities for college. So again, I'm just giving you the context of what I've been, privy to up until this point. I do know that Mr. DiPietro is planning on coming to a board meeting later this year, and this is part of the discussion that he is going to share here. He's going to loop back to that biliteracy seal that he talked to us about earlier in the year, but this is part of that discussion. And so that's kind of the whole picture as it stands right now.
I'll add one more thing, and the board really has not gotten involved in this discussion. It's not a board level at all yet, but I do a lot of advocacy at the state level, and one of the things we found, and this is probably not part of your conversation, but just to share with you, that as the state is converting a lot of our regions to Common Core regions, we're finding a decline in quality of the test and reliability of the test. So last year's geometry region had, I think, at least 4 questions that were disqualified, and then another handful that probably should be disqualified that weren't. So repeatedly, Mr. A had to email the 9th graders,
Right.
Your score just changed. So these tests could be better. Again, that's not part of the discussion. That's just my own experience.
Well, I have to say, though, if you have one year of errors in regents, is not, in my estimation, a reason to throw out the baby with the bathwater. But I think, and as, just to your comment, if you want to have the stress of the children, the tests, I think you could have the regents be the final. I just don't know how you are going to see how certain teachers are performing or students are performing. I don't know if you want to lay it at the feet of the teachers or not. But as I said, I'm a middle school teacher. I'm a parent of twins in middle school, and all these things are being decided in high school. And I'm just learning about this as a middle school parent, and I'm a little concerned. I think it's supposed to be rigorous, and I want my children. I'm not saying that they have to. I don't want them to be stressed out their entire life, but I want to know what the process is and what the analysis is. Not that someone just decides it and everyone just goes with it.
Yeah, I don't think that that's the case. I will say that. I mean, again, I'm relatively new to the conversation, but the understanding I have based on what's been shared is that it's been a very thorough discussion from multiple angles. In fact, kids' voices have been part of the conversation as well. And so I understand what you're saying, and the perspective that you have brought up is one that has been put on the table as a reality that we need to consider if we were to move away from these assessments. What are the implications as it relates to our student performance statewide, right, or locally or whatever? But it is just that, it's a variable, so we're looking at a lot of different variables and basically doing the whole pro and con, right? And so which one is going to outweigh, and that would inform the recommendation in the end. So your perspective, though, is one that's on the table, and certainly one that I will re-communicate to our staff, because it is important to us that our families understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, but also to hear from our families as we do that.
Okay, I just ask that when you make your decisions, or if you're opening it up for comment from parents, that it be made apparent to the FMS middle school that it's an FMS issue too, because these are issues that, you know, our kids will be in high school, and all of a sudden these tests are either no longer offered, and I know, you know, whether or not some people say they are required or not required for SUNY schools, whatever. I'm not at that stage yet. I only have 7th graders, but you know, I've heard things, and I'd like it to really be evaluated.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there more public comment? Okay, next, curriculum instruction. Do you want to give your update?
I do, yes, especially since Elliot asked.
Elliot, listen up.
Hello. So Elliot, as a piece of background, so you know, but also, you know, publicly people know, currently we have a vacant position that's the Director of Curriculum and Instruction. And so what we have done over what I have done over the last 6 months or so is spend a lot of time listening to people within our organization and our community, not just our organization, to hear about what some of the needs are that exist around curriculum, around learning, around instruction, and using that information to inform whatever decisions we make as a district to support learning in our district. Okay, so as it relates to the title of the position, that recommendation will actually come at our next board meeting, and what exactly that person should be doing or will be doing as part of their job would come if it's one person, right? And so what has happened over the last few months is, and particularly over the last few weeks, is input from our teachers as well, particularly from the whole staff. So I went to the middle school, the elementary school, and the high school, and posed 2 questions to our teachers and gave them an opportunity to kind of reflect on, one, how can we continue to support their work in teaching and learning and instruction as a district? So what supports do they need? And then if they're looking for someone, if we are filling a position district level to oversee curriculum, what skills and experiences do we want that person, those people, to have? And so that's been really quite informative so far. But I just went to the elementary school last week, so we're waiting. I have to process that data to really kind of put it together and synthesize what we're looking for. So that is where we're at. Is that good?
Sorry, yeah, I was just asking because I thought it was like whether or not the position would exist, but there's going to be a direct...
There's going to be someone doing
Something.
curriculum. And I'll also say that I don't love the word curriculum. Right? I talked a little bit about this with our staff when I went to present, because and it just might be a personal thing, but I see curriculum as the stuff. So we really want someone or some people, and I would be actively involved in it as well, overseeing the learning and instruction, right? Because it is about all learners, and it is all about all instruction, whatever stuff you're using, whether you're using this program or that program or not. And so the data, the information that I've gotten from people, both informally through one-on-one conversations, small focus groups. I mean, I see some of our awesome SEPTA families in the room, and we've had conversations about this as well. I mean, that not just also generally, but very specifically linking to the work that our special education director and assistant director are doing, because that has to be very closely aligned, right? And so those conversations have happened there with PTSA. We've talked about it as a board, and teachers as well. So, yeah, that's where we're at.
So you have to hold off on completing your resume.
So come back.
No.
Yeah, get your resume in order.
Just if this is anything, as a high school student, I guess I found that in my 3 years that the best and most I've taken away from any class, like that's something I'm kind of passionate about, like, are the ones that I'm not saying that you have to like teach in like that. I remember like in those methods where like there's no actual teacher and you do a checklist. I remember from, like, in middle school we had that, and like it wasn't like it was weird. Anyway. Yeah, that one. Yeah, and I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the teachers that diversify how they teach, not like doing away with lectures and just like kind of like that like basic like lecture notes kind of thing, but just like diversifying what they're doing are the ones the classes that I've taken away the most from.
And Elliot, that comment is reflective of some of the other things I've heard from your peers, and that does speak to the work of someone who is overseeing learning and instruction, because part of that person's work would be professional development for our teachers to consider different big instructional approaches to best support where they are, right? And to also recognize that there's not one way to do it, because lectures are really good sometimes and do meet the needs of the learner. Hands-on might be really good in some instances, but not, so understanding that we want to have a broad spectrum of skills, but to support our teachers in all of those, without overwhelming anyone either. So I appreciate that you said that, because that's something I've heard from your peers in the high school as well. What are some of the things that have stood out as learning experiences for them, and how that can inform this work? Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Great questions.
When we have to interview, we're going to have students be part of that process as well. So hopefully you'll be one of those people.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Elliot.
Okay, next are business items. We have our regular business items as well as our placement and services for CSE and CPSE. Does anything proceed as a consent agenda unless anybody wants to pull anything else? The one thing I'm going to just make a note on, because I've always this is something that I never understood, and Maureen very patiently explained it to me. If anybody takes the time to look through these things, you'll see that we have to have like health contracts with our neighboring school districts, and you might think, why is that? And the answer is, when we send one of our students there, we are required by law to pay for the nursing services and some other services. And the price varies from district to district depending on how the formula plays out. So sometimes it would be as low as 600 sometimes, and sometimes it's as high as
1,000.
Yeah. So there are two of those on here. I think one is Dobbs, which is probably our children at Master, and one is Irvington, which
Would be it's right, John Cardinal O'Connor.
Yeah, it's the
Anyway,
Cardinal
since
O'Connor.
If you really want to understand what goes on our agenda, just thought I'd point that out. Okay, so with that...
One other question. On number 10 with this H2M Architects and Engineers, is this the firm that we used in the last bond?
Yes.
How does this pricing for initial services compare to what they proposed in the last bond?
It's the same, so it's really just because they don't want to take on the work if it doesn't end up being like, if you notice, they'll take
They take half of it back to the credit, yep.
I mean, they definitely, you get a lot of hours for that, I think, with the hope that it's going to end up being a larger project, because that's really where they make their money.
Okay. And so they were both the advisor, the initial advisor survey, as well as the architect in the last bond?
Yeah.
All right.
And we have been with other architects before, and is there a full-service firm, and they have all the engineers on site, so working with them, they definitely have a lot more that they can offer in terms of doing that, so you don't have to contract out with all different electrical.
We had three different architects.
Yeah.
Right. So they were the pre-bid consultants, and then when it came time to bid the project, they were the winner of that bid process. So there were two or three other firms that bid as well.
Sure.
Do they have an inherent advantage, and I don't mean anything nefarious here, but do they have an inherent advantage as being part of sort of the pre-process?
That's a good question.
Well, I mean, theoretically, in that they are vetting it on something, they're able to see before. Yeah, but when you go through that, I mean, as far as I understand it,
if we decided we were not happy and we wanted to go back out, you can do whatever you want. It's professional service, so.
But when you actually pick the people to do the work, you have to consider fairly all three. Like they don't have an advantage.
No, it should be a comprehensive bid package that goes out for bid when we go to the actual.
But they have to think about, well, if you're going to redo the fields, what would you want to do? And so that's sort of, and they do the engineering review of the buildings.
But they have an advantage in that they did our last.
They're very familiar with
Yeah, they know us, they know the facilities, and that's a fair thing. But at the actual process of which one you take, But
Not
when you go,
necessarily.
they don't necessarily have
And a
it.
lot of times it's a good time because usually once you're done with the bond, a lot of districts will never go back to the architect.
Or vice
Right.
versa.
I mean, that happens.
Or vice versa. The architectural firm doesn't want to work with
Yeah,
the district.
so the
it's a
fact
good
that
sign.
we got through one and we're like, oh.
Contractor in your own home.
That's,
Yeah, I was just about to-
it is.
I was just thinking, I'm not sure that. Yeah, true.
It is exactly that.
Okay, so may I have a motion to approve all of the items under agenda number 5, business?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? All opposed? Next is our personnel. We have
Just schedule the,
appointments, salary, leaves of
I don't know
absence,
that-
and resignations.
Yes. So if you want me to quickly just point out the thing that things that stand out, some Schedule B stuff there, just coaching staff for the spring. So that's going to be on there. We have a part-time monitor being added there. Also, to recognize Nina D'Amato is one of our kindergarten teachers over at Hillside. She's just moving up based on the credits that she completed.
Yep.
Salary scale. Katie Magnata is a 4th grade teacher at Hillside. She completed the national board certification process, which is really rigorous.
Awesome.
So she is on there for that. So congratulations to Katie. It is no joke, that process. Also further down,
What
you'll
does it
see-
entail?
It entails a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of reflection on your own practice.
Yep.
And I can tell you that after I read about the process, I did not pursue it. To be transparent, because I was like, whoa, for what? But after doing my doctoral studies, I would say that this might even be a little bit harder.
Right.
Because you're doing so much of it on your own. Like, you really have to be very disciplined and very...
Great.
So, yeah. And we have, it was interesting because I actually saw Dr. Montesano recently, and somehow we started talking about national board certification.
Yep.
And the conversation is, a lot of teachers don't pursue it. Because it takes time, it costs money, it's not, and when I mentioned that, one of our teachers said, he's like, that's great, like, we're starting to see more and more teachers pursue it here, so. And then I bring him up because he was part of the discussion of how this fits into our salary schedule, which is nice to see that our teachers are being rewarded for it. So, and then just, it's a resignation, but not a resignation, it's a retirement.
It's a retirement,
In that, there is a resignation also of one of our teacher aides, but we also have a retirement in Andy Lubitz, who is one of our special ed teachers at the middle school. He's retiring. We are going to honor our retirees in May, but we are accepting his letter intending to retire at the end of the year.
Yep.
So.
Okay, any questions? And they're okay to proceed as a consent agenda? Okay, may I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Next, approval of our minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes because I think that I held us off on the other one when it was actually accurate. So my apologies on that. I think we can consider them both together. Does anybody have any comments? Okay,
I just have not a comment about those, but Janine, just going forward for today's minutes, that we still have Parker's name on for the student rep.
Right, I'll switch it to,
Okay?
I'll change it to who was present.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the November 27th meeting as well as the December 11th? And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Committee reports, facilities. Was it you? Who was that? I was there.
You and I.
You and I. Okay. You can present or I can present after.
Let's do it together, Lisa. Let's see.
Within 3 minutes.
I would love to.
Just kidding.
We had the representatives from H2M there, and they went over with us basically what was on the 5-year plan and the things that, they gave us this wonderful document that sort of went year by year over the next 5 years and kind of outlined how much was in, what were which items they were anticipating we would need to do work on, and what the current estimates were. There are some things that hadn't yet been priced out because I think they had come up more recently.
They wanted to come over the break when we were off with their structural, all their engineers to do some more in-depth work.
And, and then I think also, once they do that, we may end up sort of moving around what
I think
stuff
they're
is in
coming back
what year.
January 30th to the next...
To our next meeting.
To your next meeting to kind of give you a better...
Yeah, so, I mean, at this point, there really isn't anything specific I would go through, just other than to say that they're sort of in the process of doing that, and that they're going to come back, and they basically did just walk us through what each of the items were that were sort of on the 5-year plan.
And I'll just add, first of all, I thought they were really great, the people, and they did sort of here's, if you had all the money in the world, here's everything you could do, and we'll then need to choose, and I'm going to just repeat this at every board meeting if I get the chance. We want to proceed with a bond because it is a way to help ease the burden on our taxpayers. In the end, we wind up paying roughly, after everything comes back, about 58 cents for every dollar that we spend. It really only costing us 58 cents, so it's a way to help our pocketbooks out, and we are going to try to move this along quickly. That's our goal. And I will say, Tony and I spoke briefly about a committee, possibly putting together a committee.
Yes, to look at, well, I think what we were hoping to do also, leave here tonight with an agreement about what process we want to do and include some sort of committee structure, right, to focus just particularly on the bond, almost like a subcommittee of the facilities committee, or, I mean, it could be the facilities committee, I guess, in essence. But I think that's what we had talked about. Was
exactly.
let's think about that so we have a process moving forward, because we were originally talking about putting this up for a vote in the fall, which and that was from their recommendation as well, right?
We were talking about just backing into because of the time.
Yes, right. No, but they said that if the fall is a good time, people come back, they're happy. People are happy their kids are back at school now. So
you don't want to tie it to the budget.
Right, to the budget vote. Right. So we're not rushing it for now, obviously, but putting it out for the fall is imperative because of the time then after that it takes to actually do the work, right? So even though we vote on it in October, we wouldn't see work for like 18 to 24 months.
Sort of the state
right,
for
state for approval.
Then bid it out, and that takes you to put
right.
out the bids for at least 60 to 90 days before you can
right.
consider what.
So we will. So yeah, I think we.
So, yeah, we were chatting about the idea of involving a few community members in this pre-process to help us come up, to help us look at this laundry list and prioritize. And the idea is if we can have some of our community members on board, it's the start of buy-in, and those people can also help us as we move forward to try to, hopefully to try to make the decisions that the community would want to embrace that would lead to a yes vote on the bond. So
we had one for prior to the, that's kind of how our other bonds
Great.
work. We had a group of people, it was a application
Yeah, we
process.
actually asked people, in particular, who were either involved in building trades or architects or engineers or people who had sort of a baseline level of knowledge so they could jump right into the discussions with the architects and the engineers on things. So, I mean, it's helpful. It's not
That's a good idea.
It was a good committee.
It was helpful to have. It was a good committee.
I mean, a couple of times what was happening, we did have a good group, but occasionally just, it was so hard to get everybody.
Yes.
We had some, but then sometimes just they had it work.
It's hard to schedule.
So what I was going to say, subsequent to our discussion the other day, I touched base with Chris Harrison in Irvington. I don't know if they just finished a bond or they're ready to do a bond. Right. Okay. And so he was talking to me about process, and this very point came up, and he said community engagement obviously being very important to getting the buy-in, but keeping it at a manageable number for coordinating meetings, but recognizing that it's more like a front-end conversation. I mean, again, from his vantage point, he's been a wonderful support in this discussion at the front end, being able to get everyone together, understand what the laundry list will be, and then talk about how we put the information out to our community and frame it for everyone so they understand. So, just something.
6 to 8 people.
Yeah. Just something.
So our board is comfortable with maybe making a decision on how to, having some level of community involvement, perhaps with people who have the experience to bring to it, or age, range of ages among, or.
I definitely think the architects and engineers, because really, they have the expertise to really help.
So do we have anything from the last time that we did this, like the application?
Sure.
Okay, so maybe we can pull that up and then we'll start from there.
Okay, so hopefully we'll be able to get something to the public in the next several weeks. Maybe?
That would be wonderful.
Okay. All right, good. So that's our facilities report, I believe.
That was, I think, the only, I don't think we did anything else. No, it was really going over this list.
Okay. And
Finance is next.
Finance is next. Who would like to report out on finance?
I can do it. I guess, one of the things, so we had a finance, so Maureen and Tony pulled proposals from, I think everyone's in except for Donna and Jody.
Yeah.
We've got a large contingent of finance meetings, pull proposals from the schools. So we took a first look at those. I guess maybe discussion for the board right now is the community engagement piece. At the meeting, Christina threw out an idea, which was, I think that for a long time, dating back years, predating my time here in Hastings, there was a Citizens Budget Advisory Committee, different forums and ways to get feedback from the community. There doesn't seem to be a lot of energy to form a big Citizens Budget Advisory Committee right now, but that said, I think there was a lot of talk about there's value in getting feedback from people. So I guess the discussion is that something that we want to explore from maybe you could just talk a little bit about the idea that you threw out.
Yeah, so the idea was rather than just sort of opening up the floodgates, but to propose a couple of questions to the community on what they value. And maybe sort of being broader-based questions on sort of philosophy and vision and whatnot, but also sort of how it could potentially relate and maybe influence the budget, whether it's this year or down the line or whatnot, but to find out from what the community, what they value. And that can sort of help frame our thinking. Does that kind of help?
Yeah, and I think what we talked about, if I may just piggyback on that, is being mindful of how we construct the feedback survey so that it doesn't potentially communicate some predetermined, like that, where this is something that's right, like a decision, and so we're looking for the yes, not so much that, and but that's not what you were saying, but that was also the discussion then. So how do we make sure that the feedback is generative in a way and productive, and people feel that I'm glad I took that survey, and it's not just okay, I took the survey, but also not putting anything out there that potentially could read as, oh, are you looking at adding that or cutting that? So that it's...
Like, what do you think about this program?
Right, exactly.
Do you value this program? Like, it wouldn't be like that.
Right. But thinking about philosophically where we stand now. So I think, and everyone seemed to like that idea, it was the construct of that, and thinking about the timeliness, Doug, just to your point about, not only do we want to do it, but, we are looking at potentially presenting the first draft of a budget on February 5th. Not the final budget, so it could iterate. But it also is not that we're not talking about we have like a year to plan this. So just something to think about.
I guess the first question is, do people think structuring something, maybe as a next step, I could, Maureen, work with you and Tony and just get a set of topical things down. Maybe Eileen, you as well, because you've been through this.
Yeah, we are also putting together a survey that's going out regarding the photo use,
the technology
also. So I think we just have to be a little mindful of sort of the fact that there are two big kind of things going on, and we just don't want to have them crash into each other. I don't know what the spacing is on them, but they're both,
It'll be like 6 to 8 weeks apart.
I think they need to be if you're going to do it.
Okay.
But the other thing I was thinking too was, do we ask in terms of a sort of ranking of what you value, rather than do you value or do not? Because I think most people would value smaller class sizes, buses, lots of after-school opportunities. So I think it's hard. Most people aren't going to say no, although in the past some people have, but it's very few. I think it's probably more helpful to say, where do you, what's your ranking on this thing, rather than a binary.
I feel like, wasn't there a survey that came out about like that? It had nothing to do with finance, but there was a ranking one, wasn't there? Was it for the superintendent?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
How'd that work out?
Very well.
Think
very
well. Pause before you do that. No,
It's easy to create one of those weighted rankings, so I think that's a good idea.
I'm just a little confused because yours sounded to me like a more open-ended, asking people what they value, and now it sounds like you're talking about giving people a list of items and telling them to put them in an order.
One of the things that we were talking about, and it might not be this, but instead of saying like, how do you value such and such a program? It's more like, how much do you value class size, or, to what extent is class size important at the, hillside, and then maybe
I mean, we could go. I mean, we can even like how important is it that APs or AP classes are open enrollment as opposed
Right.
to because that would potentially have financial implications down the road.
Then I think somebody, maybe it was Tim, brought up that a question could be about just sort of taxes and
Yes, right.
and the budget itself and how it's connected to school
What's the
taxes.
thing that you worry about the most, right? Like, so I think there may be an opportunity to leave one of those. And Doug, you're very good at the survey construction, but something at the end that is open-ended, like almost one of those box here. Feel free to share whatever you want in this little second.
The only thing that's hard with that, and I remember you and I working on this, is to then collate that and to fairly collate it. It's very hard, unless you want to list everything. But then sometimes there's things that aren't always written in the kindest way, so you bring in some level of editing. It brings in a lot of issues around it. It's not saying we shouldn't do it, but it's...
That means you have to have some people dedicated on the other side of, the other end of
And
this.
that does go back to the structure of it, like how it's worded. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, but-
yeah.
And I guess the other question I would,
Sorry. I feel like we're in some horror
Suddenly
movie.
there was-
We're like hiding in the...
let me see if I remember what I was saying.
It was
Well, I guess, because I'm not on the finance committee, I haven't been going to these meetings, I don't know where we are in terms of feeling like potentially we have to make structural changes to the district in order to get a budget passed. So if we aren't, I don't know if we're at that point yet where we need to ask people what they value, or are we? Or is it premature?
I would say it's not premature.
Okay.
I would say that we're really looking at not only the short-term piece, but a lot of the conversations have been around that long-term sustainability of what we value. What is it that programmatically, structurally, human resource, personnel-wise, what is it that are those most important things? Because this whole budget process is evolving, right? And so while you take into consideration things like a growth factor, that might look very different next year. So how do we plan accordingly? And so these conversations, I think, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but that's how it kind of fell on me as we were thinking about this, seeking input, because we may be faced with some decisions that are a little more complex than just, okay, well, we don't need this phone, we'll get that phone, but do we need a phone? I don't know. Not again.
We're probably more like long-term.
Yeah, that's what I mean. The long term, but the earlier we have that information, the more informed we can plan out. Right. That's all. So.
But I think it has to be very clear if you do a survey because people, the minute something gets on a survey like that, everyone does make assumptions.
Yes, and then we talked about that. That was the conversation.
A lot of narrative around
Yes.
this.
It makes assumptions about, that decision's been made, that kind of thing.
Not that necessarily the decision's been made, but that certain things are on the chopping block,
Yeah.
because why are we asking about this and not asking about that?
Right.
Well, why don't we maybe construct something, take a look at it, and we can decide, what, maybe it doesn't make sense to
Right.
send it out. But at least, the other conversation that came up was, I don't think a lot of us know what's going to happen with the new way the taxes are going to go. And I think we want to just get out in front of understanding what the community is thinking about in advance of that. I mean, I think the last thing we want is to have a whole bunch of people get hit with higher tax bills next year and then get the pitchforks together. And we're not going to know really what until March of 2019. I mean, more proactive people will know, but a lot of people won't know until March of 2019. Probably the ones that will show up and really want to share the meeting will know before March of 2019. But all the more reason, I think, to at least just to start some of that, that dialogue. I mean, maybe we'll take a shot at it. I mean, I think it's hard to talk about these stuff in a vacuum. We'll take a shot at putting something together and then have something more concrete.
And I also think we have, really fortunately, a parallel activity that will unfold with this bond that might actually inform potentially what community engagement looks like around the budget more long term. Like how we do this bond process might help inform, maybe not necessarily for this year exactly the same way, but for next year, how we want to engage a community, because we may have a structure. We may have like a skeleton of what works. So this year, how we seek engagement might be, or how we define engagement might be a little different than what we do.
Well, so what's strategic planning? Strategic planning is a bunch of decisions you make, and the budget's how you resource the strategic plan. I think there's a way to think about this as the head end of a strategic planning process as well. And we can kind of tie it all together. So tie it all together. And I'm just kind of thinking out loud now. There may be just a really smart, proactive way to get out in front of a bunch of this stuff. So maybe over the next week we can think about it and come up with a plan.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on. Health and safety.
We met before the break on middle of December. So it wasn't a jam-packed meeting, but we talked a little about emergency evacuation plans and our ability and our coverage for people who need extra assistance. So the nurses and Melissa Hardesty in particular were going to work because they needed to talk about it at faculty meetings. Given how fluid people's schedules are, you can't always say, you're near this room, so you make sure you go and check this person. So there has to be, so they're going to be working on that, but that was something that they definitely felt needed a little bit of help with. They were talking about ongoing safety training, both regular, the TAP, which is the online protocol, TAP app, and the guy who's been our consultant for safety, for lack of a better term. He was going to come back to faculty meetings and talk a little bit more about that.
And he started. He's already started. Hillside last week.
And then there was also training that they're going to be setting up in February for first aid and CPR. So that's just something that they have more faculty involved in. We talked a little bit about the traffic study. There had been a proposal ran through the village to evaluate safety around the school in particular, because they're doing that in the village, and to get it done around here. But there was a tremendous lack of enthusiasm given the price tag, given that we've been through this kind of thing before and not too much has really changed. So we didn't think it was roughly $30,000 to do the study, which seemed...
We are going back to see, it was 2 parts. So there was the second part that was just about the drop-off, so to see if they could do that work.
Yeah, and I think that one was like 6,000 or 7,000, and the rest was 22. So maybe some portion of that, but not the full thing that they were talking about. One thing we did talk about though was given our capacity to do certain things because we're on state roads or local roads and things like that. If you go through Dobbs Ferry, up by where the South Church is, they have blinking yellow lights, and that was one thing that they thought about. Rather than having an extra crossing guard, maybe you could do something like that, because that really gets people's attention. That might be one thing we could manage locally. So they were going to follow up and look into...
Are you going to get back to us about some things?
About the crossing guard.
Is that what, about the crossing? Oh, man.
I think you went to speak to Chris Keel, remember? He said, I'll come in and talk to you tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
The crossing guard.
5 corners.
The 5 corners, yeah. So that was at least... That was actually the first time I've heard about the blinking lights idea. I thought that was a good idea. So, and it's something that we could actually control ourselves. And then the last thing was give an update on the cafeteria. The Bring Back Try It Tuesdays, which are a big popular thing. But also the comment was made that there's been a really good relationship between our staff, which has been very stable, and the kids. And in particular working with kids who have special dietary needs, getting them and their families comfortable with what we're offering and what they can pick and how they pick it and things like that. So it sounded like things were good in the cafeteria as well, which is nice.
It's a great space to have to say.
Yeah. So that was it.
Let's go try Tuesday.
Also, just one thing, in the past we have done forms for leaving feedback, because we've talked about having notes from meetings. Forms. No more forums. But in terms of follow-up, so that they can attach to the agendas. So I sent it to Janine earlier, but you can see what it is. If you want to use the copy, it's basically just who's there, what's talking, what the points are, and comments, anything to come out. But that way we can have some sort of regular reporting out, since these are all open meetings and they're supposed to have minutes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else on health and safety? Diesel.
I'm happy to report. Sure, yeah. And so our diesel committee met with in conjunction with our Hastings Rise community organization and our working inclusion parent group from the PT. Is that right? Inclusion working inclusion.
PTSA inclusion working group.
We met on December 13th, and we talked about a few different things, and that had come off, had come a couple of days after our last board meeting, so we had some conversations about the board meeting, but then we went really head on into a protocol for handling incidents of bias. And so I'm happy to report that we're making some progress there. We talked a bit about the protocol while we were together, and then I shared it with Karen Hammerness, and Karen is she's the director of RISE? Or is she? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know about direct. I don't know.
Well, she's working with us here, which is great.
She's been incredible in meeting the meetings.
So
she, a lot of good time.
Yeah, and so she took the, and when I say protocol that we had developed, the draft, it was very bare bones, and she worked with the educational subcommittee of RISE in addition to some of our parents. I think there's intersection there, and they just provided us with really great feedback last night. I got the email from them last night, which is great. And so Jesse Merchant and Tesfa Stewart are going to facilitate a committee in-house to now take that feedback, take what we have as a skeleton, and try to develop a protocol for handling incidents of bias. And while I think initially I thought we were going to be able to kind of get it out quickly, get it done quickly, I think it's going to take a little longer than I anticipated because of the quality of the feedback and really leading to some thoughtful discussions. And that committee is going to be made up of parents of a student. I think, Elliot, we were going to actually reach out to you maybe to join the conversation. Administrators, teachers, and one representative from CSEA and from the custodial union as well, so that we have representation of the entire community. So that's going to be unfolding, and I believe they have a date set for a meeting, but we had to, because of the snow days on Thursday, Friday, we weren't able to actually solicit people, because we are actually planning on reaching out to PTSA and SEPTA to get the parent members. So I don't think we did that yet. Did you? Did you get it? Did you get an email?
Not for anything beyond elementary school level.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll talk. So we're looking for those components to come together for the meeting. But as I said, I don't think it's going to be, we're meeting on January 17th, and we're leaving that meeting with a done protocol. I think we're going to leave with the next draft of it, which will then lead to further discussions. So I have not been part of Diesel before, but I do feel like what we've had in terms of the couple of meetings that we've had so far this year, thanks to Karen Hammerness and the family members who are willing to be here, and the community members and board members, I think we've had some really productive discussions. Some difficult, some not so difficult, but really productive. And so, did you want to?
I'm sorry if I just missed this, but are there other districts or other places that we're pulling some
So I went out.
practices, scars, learning from?
I went out I went out on social media, and I went out privately, and I could not get one incident protocol. Everyone defers to either an outside organization's protocol, which we used as a way to inform our skeleton. So the teaching tolerance one is one that multiple people reference, but they kind of just use it as it is. They haven't personalized it to their own organization. And the other feedback I got, particularly from independent schools, which was, I thought maybe independent schools, because they have a director of diversity, that they don't use a protocol because they treat every incident differently.
I'm sorry, because what?
They treat every incident differently. They handle, again, and I'm not necessarily that I've reached out to every independent school, but I did put it out there on social media, and I have a small group of independent school heads that I tagged in the post to say, hey, do you go? And it was, the word draconian was used to describe why they wouldn't do that. So it was interesting.
So, Tony, just to corroborate what you're saying, usually if something's out there, I can find it online. And I searched public schools, and I had the same thought. I thought maybe a field student that's really actively working on race. I searched independent schools. Nothing. I found lots of colleges. Lots and lots of colleges have protocols. Could not find one.
So one person I did speak to, who is working in Wisconsin, she is an assistant principal in Wisconsin, but they work with the National Equity Project. So they're actually doing some work around this particularly. And what she shared with me was that they were kind of just collapsing within their code of conduct, if you will, how you handle any incident, and that the National Equity Project was almost, I don't want to say that they endorsed, I don't know because I wasn't there, but like that almost that they were saying, yeah, that's the way to go. But that's neither here nor there. We do have something to work off of. We do have needs that I think are specific to our community. What it might look like in the end, I don't know. But I think it's going to take a little longer to develop. I think initially we thought it was going to be, okay, we have something that kind of looks nice. We can tweak it a little, make it our own. But I think as the discussion has unfolded, we want to be much more thoughtful about it and intentional. So.
And I will share, and this came out through the meeting, and it was really wonderful that the idea was definitely not to have this be a punishing
Yes,
thing.
oh, thank you, Lisa.
That
Yeah.
it's about education and getting people to look inside themselves and grow and understand and be, let's make our world a better place.
And put it out like on the front end of conversation. You know how like kids have like a code of conduct or their handbook or something, but put this protocol out to your point, Lisa, of it being educative, so that people see it at the front end. All right, these are the expectations I have, because we have to be very intentional about the subject of inclusivity and how we deal with incidents that marginalize any subgroup of people, whether it's based on gender, race, sexuality, a disability, whatever it is, or ability. It was something we have to be mindful of. So that's all. So we're going to be trailblazers, which is always fun.
Hey, we're Hastings.
But it takes a little time. So.
Okay. Any other comments? New business or old business, I'm not quite sure what it's calling, but we have our acceptable technology use. Do you want to discuss this?
Sure. So based on all the conversations we had previously, what we're putting up for first read is basically an interim version of a policy pending further discussion with the community and a public forum of what we might want to do in terms of any use of social media. For now, the only change we're making to the policy is in point number 15, where it had said in the past that the posting of any student photograph with or without identifiable information on the internet or email is strictly prohibited. We've replaced that with a slightly longer paragraph that explains that any posting on the district website, newsletters, and emails will only be allowed if the parent or guardian or person in parental relation has not signed the district. Will only be allowed if they have not signed the district's opt-out form. So it's basically, this has nothing to do with posting on social media. This still says very clearly that employees will not be permitted to post any students or videos on social media. It's purely talking about the district being able to post photographs on the internet, on the district website, excuse me, and just bringing that into line with the fact that we currently do that if parents have not opted out, and the way this had been worded didn't even allow for the fact that a parent had that choice. So the idea is that at our next meeting, we can vote to approve this just to correct that one error in the previous policy, and we're still planning, I think you said in March, to have a forum for the community so that we can sort of talk about whether or not we want to change the policy in terms of any social media use. Anyone have any questions? I mean, I think our committee sort of vetted this language, and then we sent it out to the rest of the board, so everyone had seen it before Janine put it on here for the first read. So I think we've all seen this, and I think are okay with the wording.
Thank you guys for doing the wording.
So is there March 5 like a public? Everyone is welcome. When this policy came up before vacation, and there were people from the community that had come to talk about it because there was some misunderstanding that what we were saying was that
there could be posting on social media. There was a lot of very strong opinions on both sides in terms of whether or not there should be any posting of anything regarding children on social media, and so we felt that that it warranted a district-wide conversation with anyone in the community could come and sort of explain to us their point of view on the matter before we made a move, before we decided if we wanted to make a move in that direction.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
So can we clarify, because now there's so many different topics going on.
I'll try.
What process that we were, March 5th, what is the process? So at one point we were talking about surveying before the hearing, one time we were talking about surveying after the hearing, or we were talking about getting input at a hearing and then putting it together and then sending that out and getting input back in a survey. I just wonder if where we get.
Well, I actually sort of thought that at our next policy committee meeting we were going to frame all that out. So having the meeting scheduled that we were having the public forum sort of actually surprised me because it seemed to jump the gun a little bit.
Well, yeah, so it's so maybe we can just, I know it's on the agenda here, but for some reason I remember us talking that it would be more like April or something like that.
Yeah.
At one point.
I can say, I had a fear, and feel free to change it, that once we leave February, everything is looking next year, and it's hard to kind of focus on this year, and we're with budget. So I was fearful that if we wait to have a hearing in April, it's too far away. I'm not wedded to that, by the way. So if we think, you know what, does it make sense for you to have your January 22nd policy meeting?
Yeah.
And if you think that the hearing date needs to change, we're certainly far out enough from it that we can change the hearing date.
Yeah, can we just, for now, not advertise that date and leave it as...
Well, we're not going to put it anywhere. Okay. It's here.
So let's just leave that as tentative and let the committee get together and actually flesh this out, because I have to say I was... I didn't realize we had scheduled a meeting.
And it did go out in the blast, right? So we'll just have to correct.
If we change it.
Right. And I think it's still so far off from January 26th.
Yeah, but
March 5th is so far off.
I think...
So 6 weeks.
But I think, Doug, the conversation about what the process should look like, because really if we're going to use the hearing to help us structure what the language should be, then March 5th is not that far. Like March 5th is probably a good time to do it, so that we do have time to construct something and then go back out with it. Right?
Well, I guess the question really is, what different can we right now write than's been written already?
Right.
And if there's not much different, then we can take this, use that as the surveyable thing and do it quickly.
Yeah, that's true.
I think at one point there was a discussion that there was going to be more research into it done, but I'm not sure how much more research there needs to be. It seems pretty clear to me right now, but
Well, I guess we could let you guys meet on the 22nd and come back.
Opt-out. It needs to be.
Yeah, there were questions of opt-in versus opt-out.
District cameras versus personal cell phones.
Yeah, I mean, and then the other thing that to me, I don't know, part of, I feel like if we make this change, we're sort of, what we've done basically is just close a loophole in the way the thing was worded before, and we're not sort of opening a floodgate to do things we haven't been doing up until now. And so it to me takes some of the urgency away of having to revise the policy yet again. And I guess I personally, even before going out to the community, would like to understand from teachers, because if the faculty doesn't see a particular use or need to utilize social media, then why are we even spending the community's time having that discussion? Whereas if the faculty is saying, we really wish we could do this and it would be educationally valuable because of X, Y, and Z, and we're currently not allowed, that's a different conversation. But if they're saying, well, we don't need to post anything, then, so I don't know. That's why I just kind of feel like maybe our committee should be talking, and we should decide sort of whether whether Tony needs to sort of go to the administrators and have them go to their faculty and find that out first.
Sure.
So.
Okay. Next is second public comment. Are public interested in commenting? Okay. Board of Ed comments.
Oh, I wanted to make one. I just wanted to bring up the fact that so during our midwinter break, I mentioned this in a board email, I thought it was a good idea for us to talk about the fact that Lisa began a process of looking into the new tax codes and real estate taxes and ramifications, and she began conversations with the mayor and conversations with the town supervisor. Then she brought us all into this, and we kind of chimed in a bit. It was mostly Lisa. Tony reached out to some of his colleagues as well. But I think it's really important for maybe the community to know that I think that the board is, thinking about sort of the tax ramifications for you all, and that there was a very concerted effort to try and do something to potentially financially help the community. It turned out that despite all of the efforts and all of the meetings that Lisa went to, all of, just everything that was tried, nothing could be done in the end. But at the end of the day, efforts were definitely made, and I think that's important to note.
But also, Lisa, I think the thing that you were talking about with the measures that are going on at the state level to try and pass legislation that would allow different treatment of the way you pay your taxes, so that's something I think we need to keep watching on.
Yeah.
Charitable stuff.
Yeah. I was going to say thank you, Christina, and I will say our mayor Peter Swiderski and our Greenberg Town Supervisor Paul Heiner went above and beyond, and despite personal things in their own lives pulling at them right and left, they were there, and we were talking to the governor's office, and they never stopped, and we're very, very lucky to have public servants like them. What Eileen just mentioned is Amy Pollin, who is in the process of putting together some bills to allow us to possibly offset some of our state taxes by donations. Whether it's going to fly or not, nobody knows, but we are closely watching it. In fact, I reached out to the other River Towns Board of Ed presidents, and one of them, actually I think from Irvington, is on the Westchester County the board there, and they're going to be working on it also. So we're all trying, that's right. And nobody knows what's going to happen. Okay, what did I comment? Okay.
Lisa, I've got just a question. I just wanted to know, and again, this may be something that's come up in Finance Committee, which I'm not in, is there a timing yet, Maureen, for negotiations to start on any of the contracts?
I think we have to start looking to set some dates in the next month or so. I think we need to get together and
the HTA had asked for some information additionally from our business office, which they got today, and so that they were wanting to look at some stuff before we set up a time to begin the process.
And has there been any conversations in Finance Committee, about who's actually going to be doing the negotiating?
Not at today's meeting, no. We did not talk about that.
Okay.
I didn't hear what you said, Tony.
We did not talk about that.
We haven't talked about it specifically yet.
I don't think they have.
Is that something that would be discussed at the Finance Committee? Is that something that we would discuss at executive session? How and when would we sort of figure that out?
I think it could be discussed right now, in fact, if you'd like, because I don't think there's anything, really we're looking at who would be part of the negotiation. We're not talking about details around the negotiation. Right. What I can tell you is that I did at some point in some conversation, being that several people involved in the negotiations process would be new to the negotiation process, it would be my recommendation that our lawyers were involved in the negotiation process.
That was actually one of the things I was going to ask you. We've done that both ways, and sometimes it sends a different message, which may not necessarily be the message you want to send to have the lawyers involved, but by the same token, since you are a new superintendent and haven't done negotiations before, I didn't know if you wanted to go in that direction, but I thought that the other thing that could potentially be useful, so sometimes we've had one or two board members involved, and potentially having since you're new at it, having board members that have been involved in it before, and I know that Jody, you've been in them, and Eileen, you've been involved in them, that to me would sort of add a comfort level on my side to have, because rather than having everyone involved in it be people that have not done it before, to sort of take advantage of Jody and Eileen's expertise in that area.
And
there's no question. For many years when I was on the board, well, I don't know how many negotiations there actually were, but the first couple were always with board, HTA, right? But it always got, I'm going to be frank about it, it always got kind of contentious, and everybody had to take their positions, and sometimes it feels like you're going through a play.
Posturing.
A what?
Posturing.
Yeah, it's a lot of posturing, but it's sort of like everybody has to do their thing, till you can come down to the final, exaggerated bargaining place. And then Roy, the last time we did it, Roy said that he was going to, and then it's like you get your lawyers, you get a mediator. I mean, it always feels to me like a lot of unnecessary posturing. It's certainly, and I think the difference is that, Roy had done it before, but it certainly seemed like it was such an easier road to travel, just having, when there was someone who was doing it so that everybody wasn't having to play their little parts. That's what I think I maybe got a little cynical, but just felt like, in any negotiation, I don't know if it's you're buying a house or whatever you're doing, you're eventually going to get somewhere, and it's like, what's the route that you're going to take till you get to the final price that you're going to pay for the car when you go to the car dealer or something?
So I think in terms of recommending that the lawyers be part of the process, I think, to your point, not to make it contentious, and not even necessarily take the lead in the process, but to be a voice in the process, because they are actively involved in negotiations in other areas, and so they could inform the discussion. I also think, my lack of experience around it is particular to that type of certainly I've been part of negotiation processes in the past, but I also think we're thinking about financial implications with the with the contract negotiations, and so we want to be as thoughtful and intentional about whatever we agree to and the long-term opportunities or not that come as a result of it.
I may be getting confused, because I guess I thought we had talked about starting out again with the lawyers not necessarily in the room.
That's what I'm saying. Not necessarily leading but informing our perspective or whatever.
So not in the room negotiating, Lisa.
Only if we need. I think that was the original.
We talked about that.
Maybe I guess the idea is, we go in thinking, well, maybe new guy, new whatever, it goes smooth. I don't know, but
yeah, I would agree with you to not have, certainly initially not to have the lawyers in the room, because I do think it does kind of make it more confrontational. But I just was thinking that having potentially the two of you in the room, maybe not necessarily saying anything, but to hear what's being said and to be able to then sort of advise Tony as to how much of what's being said is what's normally said, what they've said before, versus is coming at it from a different angle.
I would say two things. One is that Maureen is also important in
yes.
there. And
I was
secondly,
assuming you were there. I wasn't
would also
leaving you out,
have-
Maureen.
I was going to give somebody my stuff.
Yeah, no, Maureen, I wasn't. That was not.
And I also think that it wouldn't be important to have another board member there.
I was going to say, I would like, and I've been crunching all the contracts and looking at all of them, so I feel, well versed in them. So I would very much like to do that.
One thing where you use the attorneys, and this is, we do always use the attorneys on this way. When you create your proposal, it wasn't, even though they weren't present, you do want them to vet it, because a lot of contract, the money is the money, right? You say that up and whatever it comes out to. It's all the contract language that you have to run by them to make sure the fact is so.
Of course they have.
They're involved in the we've always involved them in the process, but not necessarily in the room. Just to make sure that what we're asking is legal, whatever. Just to make sure it fits within what they think is acceptable.
And I would also say, we do have two other contracts too, so we kind of
right. And I think that, and I only bring up the HTA because typically what I I know of school districts is you do the biggest one first, and then you kind of work from there.
That's true.
So the HA would be first, and then you go,
And most people don't, like, that's sort of timely.
But yeah, not to negate the other two, that's a fair point. CSEA and our administrative team as well. Those contracts are going to be negotiated in the coming months also.
Well, can I clarify? I'm not sure how it goes in school districts. I mean, I'm more familiar with the private sector, but you come up with your theory and what you want to get, and you come up with a sense of what you think they're going to be looking for. And at what point do we, whether there's the financial part, there's the other chits of the negotiation from whatever else can be negotiated. There may not be a lot of those things, but I don't know. But how does the process go from the board perspective? Who comes up with that theory of our entry point first? Is that a subcommittee that discusses that? Or does the whole board talk about it in executive?
Really, finance, Maureen and the finance committee, right?
Well, we've been speaking to the principal, right? The
Yes.
leadership team, and we actually have a list of things that, because you asked the building level, what are some things that you think are problematic or be improved, or maybe not problematic is the right word, but
what are things that
in
we
the
can...
contract that you think have areas for improvement, or even just are not clear. It could even just be language. It could be that not trying to change anything, but just to clarify something. The practice versus what's written, right?
Or things that we have side letters on that we want to get.
Or even like the late start Fridays, like that's not written anywhere in the contract. So like that just may be
things that might need definitions.
Right, exactly. So it's a combination. So there are things like that, and then there are items that you work with the lawyers. Tony and I go to negotiations, clearinghouse workshops that are everybody in the county really cut them in Westchester, and we discussed trends in negotiations. Things that you should be thinking about.
So like historically, you and Roy, let's say, came up with a strategy, ran it by the finance committee, discussed a little bit.
Ran it by, no, executive session.
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
It has to be an executive session.
No, it wasn't came up with a strategy. It was really coming up with
these are what we're thinking.
A contract of what we're thinking of, what were the limits of what financially what we could do, and what we were thought were some of the options of the ways that we could get to where we want to be. Wouldn't you say that's right? Yeah.
But there do have to be conversations in executive session
with
everyone, because you all have to agree, right? You all have to agree to.
So just so maybe I'm being thick, but just so I understand this, Maureen and Tony will get together and kind of come up with the theory and the strategy for what it looks like. We discuss it all together in an executive session at some point in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
For sure, for sure.
Okay, and then we go from there and we see where we go.
Right.
Because when you meet, you typically will lay out the ground rules, and then the next thing is, so we're going to both come up with a set of proposals, and then you exchange proposals, and then there's a time that you just either talk about trimming down proposals or narrowing the scope and trying to explain them, each have an opportunity. So that's kind of the way it works.
Can I throw this out just as a logistical thing? Do we want to schedule or just have us all hold certain times for executive sessions, maybe not attached to a board meeting? Just so we all, over the next whatever, so we have some times if we need to have those meetings?
Yeah, no, that's a good idea.
Definitely.
Okay, anything else? All right. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Okay.